This is the Brewing Fiction Podcast, where we dive deep into the world of fiction alongside its writers. In the following episode, you will hear the up-close and personal journey into the worlds created by our guest. So grab your cup, get comfortable, and let us pour you a steaming cup of captivating storytelling. Here on the Brewing Fiction Podcast, we bring hidden stories to life and share them with the world. Welcome back to another episode of the Brewing Fiction Podcast. First of all, it is my pleasure to announce that H.R. Parker, my guest from the premiere episode, has joined the podcast as your new co-host. And let's give a warm welcome to our guest today, writer, editor, poet, and artist, Alison McBain.
Welcome, Alison.
We're going to jump right into today's episode. Alison, you don't get much of a break at all. We're going to go with what I like to call Author's Corner, and that just gives you a few moments to tell us a little bit about yourself. And I know there's lots to tell. We'll let you tell us a little bit about how you got started, and then we'll jump into some questions to let our guests get to know you better.
Awesome. Well, I write a little bit of everything. So I have some novels out there, short stories, poetry, essays, and I pretty much write in most genres these days. Nothing's off the table for me, and if I haven't written it yet, I probably will in the future. I love doing something creative every day. And it doesn't always have to be writing. Sometimes I like doing knitting or crocheting. And one small, I don't know if it's a secret, but one thing that I also like to do is I like to draw. I do a webcomic.
Cool.
I'm a mom, so I have 3 daughters. And, if you're a parent, you can either laugh or you can cry when you get into those.
Right.
So I prefer to laugh. So I started drawing many years ago when my youngest was quite young. I started drawing a cartoon called Toddler Times. And I just posted online, just a webcomic. And I have a lot of laughs. And actually, now that my kids are older, they read it and they really like it. And they think it's funny. So they can see themselves in my sort of crude Dilbert-esque drawings. I won't claim any great artistic talent, but it's fun.
That is very cool.
That is cool. We'll have to, maybe we can get a link to some of that stuff.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Sure.
Cool. All right. Well, you know what? Let's go with our Fast 5 here. And Alison, what this is we're going to give you a pair of words, and you're going to choose which one is your favorite. Just going to help us have a little bit of fun and just get to know you a little bit better.
Sure.
All righty. Okay.
Sounds fun.
All right. So in your writing, are you a plotter or a pantser?
I am a plantser.
Yes.
Me too.
Well, all 3 of
what
us.
I'm writing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good for you. All right. Your favorite, shall we say, characters? Is it heroes or anti-heroes?
Oh, definitely the anti-heroes. I like complex characters, yeah.
Yes.
Nice.
Awesome.
Good. Are you a beer drinker or a wine drinker?
Actually, neither these days. But if I was forced to choose, probably wine.
Okay. No one's going to force you to choose. How about coffee or tea? We should stay with the podcast theme.
Yeah, exactly. I love coffee, but again, I don't drink that much of it these days. So I'm definitely drinking tea these days. But
Nice.
yeah.
Okay. All right. Are you a writer who requires silence, or do you like background music, background noise?
Oh, absolute silence. Like I even have earplugs next on my desk so that I can
cool.
Again, with those kids, sometimes you need to shut out some of the background noise.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. And my favorite is, are you a cat person or a dog person?
I feel like my answers to all of these have been in the middle. I
Yeah.
I have cats right now, and I love cats, but I also love dogs.
Right.
So, unfortunately, I live with someone who is allergic to dogs, so we can't have them. So, but if I could, I would have both. So, really in the middle.
Yeah. I have 3 cats, as we talked about. They're running around here somewhere. And I think I just heard Jake, Heather, right? Jake is.
Yes, Jake was sorry about that.
Oh, no, not at all. Yeah, they're allowed to be part of this as well.
Very cool.
Yeah. Let's jump into the interview, Alison. Hopefully, our listeners are going to be interested in some of the things you have to say here. I know I'm quite anxious to hear. So
Yeah.
let's jump into this, okay? I know you introduced yourself and gave us a little background, but how did your journey start as an author?
Well, I started writing actually quite young. So as soon as I pretty much knew what words were, I started putting them together. I always was a storyteller. And probably quite young, my parents would probably say, I like to bend the truth. So I was telling a lot of fiction stories when it came to my own life too, when I was really young. But yeah, the first story that I wrote was actually when I was 4. And my parents actually have it somewhere in the recesses of their house. But it was a horror story about the monster in the closet.
Yes.
Cool.
And then I didn't really do much, of course, with my writing up until later. But when I was having after I had my second daughter, I was stuck at home, and as you know, it can be quite insular, I guess, when you have all you have are the kids all day. So I decided to start writing again, and I haven't stopped since.
Nice. Great. That's pretty young. You know what? I'm a young writer. I only started about a year ago, so I'm always intrigued how writers get started so early. And if you're talking about today, your I'll say your writing process or your routines, do you have anything specific that you'd like to share to the audience? Is there something specific that helps you get in the zone or helps with your writing?
Well, it's a job. So this is my full-time job.
Okay, nice.
Yep. I do
awesome.
writing for myself. So short stories, I write on Medium. I write, articles about writing. I'm a ghostwriter. So I work for clients. I work with authors directly. I work with publishing houses, writing mostly books. And I'm an editor. So I, have a number of clients, mostly repeat clients, where I whip their books into shape, ready for publication.
Nice.
So it's sort of, my full-time gig. And so I don't really need to get motivated anymore. I guess deadlines motivate me and bills to pay motivate me. So the rest of us.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you and Heather can certainly have conversations about the editing portion, and I could certainly use some of that help. All right. Full-time job for you then, Alison. So are you lucky enough to be 40 hours a week, or does this take a lot longer? Does it vary? Why don't you tell me about your typical week?
I like to joke. So my aunt is an artist, and we both freelance. We do our own thing. And I like to joke with her that if you are a freelancer, if you're your own boss, you have the worst boss in the world.
I know what you mean.
So off, right? So you're like, oh, I can just take on this other project. Oh, this project is awesome. Yeah, I totally want to do this. So it's more than 40 hours. I won't say how much more, but I work from home, so it's great. I get to see my kids regularly, and it's when you love what you do, you're lucky, but you're also sort of unlucky because then you want to do it all the time.
Yeah.
All right. And what genres do you enjoy writing the most?
Oh man, that's like saying who's my favorite kid.
I was like that too when he asked me that question. I was like, wow, how do you pick?
Right.
Yeah, it's hard because well, one reason why I like to work on a lot of projects at a time is because I get a jump. So like I might be writing for a client, I might be writing a romance, for example, and then another client I might be writing a fantasy, and then another one I might be doing a thriller. And those are actually all genres that I'm working on right now.
Cool.
So I like to jump. So like I think I would maybe get bored if I was just doing one genre, but of those, I don't know. I really love fantasy, and two of my books that are published right now are fantasy. So I don't think that that's something that's going to fall off my radar. But yeah, that might be my true love, fantasy.
Nice.
Very nice.
Wow. We Heather and I talked about it last time we spoke, and she talked about how easily distracted she is, and I agreed. I'm the same way. I can't imagine writing for different people who, maybe your head has to be in the game a little bit better, or maybe not. But I'm easily distracted. I don't know how I would perform under those circumstances. So good for you.
So, well, I mean, honestly, like, I think most writers are like, ooh, something shiny. So this is why I need
exactly.
to
That's me. 100% me.
Yeah, definitely. But it's hard. Sometimes it's hard to focus, and I won't lie. Like it. Sometimes I am late on my deadlines a little bit. Hopefully, not too much, but it happens.
Life happens.
Yeah, most of my clients are long term, and so they know me, and they're okay. They cut me some slack.
That's good. That's really great. How did you get into poetry? I know you write fiction and you write a lot of articles with really great advice. But how did you get into poetry? Your poetry is amazing, by the way.
Oh, thanks so much. That's so good to hear. It was sort of like the story writing. I've always loved poetry, and I would recommend it to even people who are like, I hate poetry. I'm never going to write poetry. I'm always going to write fiction. It really, really helps writing because it makes you choose every word carefully. It's very brief. So especially for those overwriters out there, this is like my number one piece of advice is write some poems. Like really try to condense an idea down to like even a haiku of 3 lines and see if you can do it, because it will help you self-edit your work. It will help you be like, okay, if I'm only allowed 5 words per line, what are the most important words to put in that line to convey the idea that I want?
Exactly.
So it's I think it's one of the number one sort of underrated tools. It's sort of like you go football players who do ballet. I'm like, are they going to become professional ballet dancers? Probably not, but it helps them so much on the field to really
It's a good analogy.
Figure out where they're going to put their feet, where they're going to, how to run, how to do it with grace. So, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I feel the same way about poetry and flash fiction. If you write a drabble saying you only have 100 words, you really have to think about every word. And a poem is that like times 100. You really have to condense that even more. So that is really, really great advice to learn how to not be so flowery and, like you said, overwrite.
Wordy.
Yeah, very true.
I always pictured my view of poetry as just that fluffy rhyming every second line and stuff like that. So I'll never know how to write poetry, but that is some great advice. Maybe I'll give it a try. I play around with Drabble a little bit here, and that's helping because I am wordy. Maybe I'll try a poem sometime. I don't think I'll be sharing it, though.
Well, you never know. There are some people who didn't. I run a poetry group, which is once a month. And there are some people who come there who are like, oh, I'm retired and I was bored and I've read a poem, so maybe I'll try to write one. And now they love poetry. It's like their new favorite thing because, I mean, a lot of it is almost like a song, and we all listen to
It
music.
is.
We all listen to songs.
Exactly.
And then they realize how much they love it and how much they love composing in short little snippets. Yeah. So you never know. You might end up loving it, Keith.
Great advice, nonetheless. Whether I'm a poet or not, I hope that's something somebody takes from this and gives it a try. Do you have a particular author that influenced your writing style?
Definitely. There are a couple. I think the number one author that I think, because she wrote both poetry and fiction, is Tanith Lee. She was sort of a groundbreaking author, and if you haven't heard of her, you're not alone. She was a British author, and she was way ahead of her time. She was the first woman to win the August Derleth Award, which is now, I think, the British Fantasy Award, I think.
Cool.
But she wrote these grandiose worlds where there were monsters and gods, and she had a wicked sense of humor, and her writing was very poetic. So I read her a lot when I was young, and I still sometimes, pick up one of her books and I'm impressed all over again.
I will have to check out her work. Ursula K. Le Guin is like that for me. She's so poetic in her work, and one of the best, I think, introductions to a book is in it's the Lathe of Heaven, I think it's called. You should definitely read that. It's all about dreams, and it's one of the best analogies I've ever read about dreaming. So I would highly recommend reading that book.
There were some groundbreaking ladies in speculative fiction.
There were. I love that.
I'm being taught lessons today. Are you a researcher, Alison? Do you do a lot of research before you start your writing? I know we talked about being a pantser a little bit, but do you do a lot of research, or just kind of as you go?
Yes and no. So I do have research that I do ahead of time, and I used to be a pantser completely. Like, I would just sit down and sort of have a vague idea in my head, and I'd start writing. Yeah. However, my last book that was published is an alternate history. And if you know anything about history, you got to get the facts right.
Yes.
So I had to do a ton of research. Like, I probably have as many notes as the length of the book. And I have a stack of books that would go up to the ceiling in my office that I turn to read and do research on the different people and languages that were in my book. So I have definitely learned to become much more, I guess, disciplined when it comes to before I start my book and make sure I get the facts right, because there's nothing worse than going down, writing 5 chapters and then realizing there was a mistake in the first one and you have to rewrite the whole damn thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So tell us about your new book that is your new historical fiction. It sounds very interesting. Tell us a little bit about your book.
Oh, awesome. It's called The New Empire, and it's a what if story. So it basically, the what if is if the timeline changed in the 14th century by having Chinese ships land in the Bay Area of California. So if they had, they might have established contact with the native populations almost 2 centuries before Europeans did. And there's some archaeological evidence that this might have happened. And I read an article about it that sort of spurred me on to think this, what if? So basically in my novel, this led to sort of a cross-continental empire built on trade with Chinese allies. So it caused the Tribal Confederacy to become a major world superpower by the time the story takes place in the 1700s. And it sort of goes around 2 characters. One is a boy named Jiangxi, who is a Chinese slave, and the son of the last Chinese emperor. And one is Onas, who is an elder of 2 tribes, and he is very respected in the community, and how they sort of come together and have a relationship that sort of transcends their traditional roles.
That is so amazing. Is this the book that won the, you went to a writing retreat and
Yes.
entered a contest there? Tell us about that. You have an article on Medium about alternate ways to get traditionally published. And when I saw that title, I was like, oh my gosh, I want to read, I had to read this.
Yeah.
So instead of finding an agent and going that route, tell us about your journey to getting traditionally published.
Yeah, it was actually really fun. And it was a contest called Pitch Week. And it's still ongoing. It's still looking for authors each year. And it's a retreat, as you said. So basically, during the pandemic, they became hybrid. So sometimes it's on Zoom, sometimes it was on person. But for me, it's actually located in Vermont. And for the first week, it was on Zoom. And the second week, which was, a few months later, it was on in person. So I actually got to travel to Vermont and spend a week up there.
Nice.
And you get to interact with professionals in the industry. So there are 3 judges, and one of the judges is always, an agent. One of them is always a PR person, and one of them is the publisher. So they give you feedback. So the first week is basically you pitch your stuff, and they tell you everything that you did right and a few things you did wrong and might want to improve on your pitch. And it really helps you see inside the industry, because part of what you're pitching your marketing plan, how to launch your book successfully, and this is what you learn from them, how to do that. And that's something that a lot of authors do not know. It's not a natural thing where you're like, okay, I just wrote a book. How do I get it out in the world?
That's the hard part.
That's the hard part, right?
It is. It's harder than writing the book itself, honestly.
Yeah. So I learned so much, and it was so fantastic. And honestly, like I did win the contest, and of course, if you win, it's great. But there's also people who aren't winning. But all of us who competed, we're all still good friends, and we stay in contact. It was sort of like going to college, and you get your college buddies, and and I've been following their journeys, and they follow mine, and it was great. It was a lot of fun.
That is an amazing journey. That's an amazing way to get published too. I mean, not everybody has a story like that. That is very interesting.
Is that just a open application? Is your work reviewed before you're accepted to the retreat?
Yes, it is reviewed. You have to send in 10 pages of your manuscript. You have to write an application letter. You have to go through an interview process over the phone. So there are some hoops to jump through, and that they do receive, I think it's thousands of submissions each year, hundreds, if not thousands of submissions. So if they do not accept everybody. So just to make a finalist and normally there's anywhere between 4 to 6 finalists in the final round. So, and they run it 3 to 4 times a year. So if you do the math, you have to jump through a few hoops before you actually get to the final round.
So again, you've already won by getting there, right?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
It's such a valuable experience. Yeah, if you actually make it as a finalist and get to go there, you learn so much.
Yeah, that's a great experience. I know you'll never forget that.
Yes, definitely.
Join us next week for the second part of our chat with Alison, where she shares details about her upcoming project, Author vs. AI. In the meantime, you can find links to her work in the description. Stop by the podcast homepage to see what else is brewing on the Brewing Fiction podcast. You can find the link in the description. And don't forget to click the subscribe button to be notified whenever a new episode is released.